So, inshallah, there is time for questions. Okay, because we are going to have a tea before Maghrib, inshallah. So there is some time for questions. So you ask the question, I will translate the question, then inshallah the answer. So you know, Al-Qadr is very much from America. He is please pay attention to the question.
The Zawiya is the institution that combines spiritual knowledge and working with the land.
Another thought.
Right. Would you speak about, well, prior to the existence of Zawiya, there was a thing called Ribat?
Yeah.
Which is, it's technically the same thing. Ribat. Ribat. And I think in Al-Andalus there were two other institutions that were also focused on agriculture and on the teaching, not just teaching, spiritual teaching, but also knowledge of the deen, which was Al-Qariya and Al-Munia. So, have you come across these?
I have, but nothing that. I think the wider context of society is more important to look at, rather than an institutional aspect. Right. Because when you're looking at a traditional economy, for example, if you're looking now, everywhere, the type of economy that you have and the structure that regulated the economy, which is basically the institution of Hisba, allowed for these skills to flourish within the wider context of spiritual values that people held. So it wasn't necessarily a self-conscious exercise. Now I will teach you this skill and I will teach you how to be spiritual when you're doing this skill. It's essentially people who have particular understandings of values, mafahim, and they're looking for outlets in order to disperse this to the people beyond them. And that's how the crafts came, because they're partly, as I said, the fundamental basis is khidmah. And you have this in the guilds. If you look at the guild literature, which some of it we have, and some of the Hizbah manuals, Shayzari is the oldest that we have, and others, you find that this reiteration of khidmah is at the center and the heart of this whole process of skillful transmission. I suppose that these other institutions are some I don't have in my form.
Well, I think my
so please tell us about it.
Well, my
Así que la pregunta de Sid Al-Qadr es que Sid Karim ha hablado acerca de la Zawiya como este lugar donde convergen la transmisión de la sensibilidad de los valores éticos y espirituales y también de la enseñanza de los oficios y de la agricultura, y le preguntaba por otras instituciones tradicionales en el Andalus donde esto también se realizaba, como Ribat, y también en cuanto a la transmisión de la agricultura, la Almunia o Aljaria. La respuesta de Sid Karim es que más que centrarnos en instituciones específicas, lo importante es ver todo el contexto social en su conjunto, porque la economía tradicional tiene un contexto, que es un contexto de un tipo de entendimiento, de un tipo de valores, que luego son transmitidos a través de instituciones concretas, a través de los oficios, a través de los gremios, y cuyo elemento esencial, como ha dicho antes, es el servicio, la khidma. Cuando uno mira a los manuales que se han conservado de los gremios, uno ve que siempre la khidma está en la esencia de lo que hacen las hijas.
Well, I think the focus of what I was going to say is that there are various institutions historically which show that there was a great importance very little of it has come down to us. And that's my concern, primary concern, is how to pick up these things and how to address them.
I think we we find from the 16th century on, it's the Zawiya model or ribat, whatever you wish to call it, that essentially acts as a micro, as a catalyst within society, as a micro society that then is not detached from the outside society. And that's the difference between a cult sort of following of people having their own attachment and the society at large. The Zawiyas were part and parcel of society because the people that led the Zawiyas were not gurus. They were ulama. And the ulama were at the heart of society. They weren't people that were detached. And so that created this leaven within the wider society, this impulse that kept societies largely very, very prosperous. We have a lot of work that was done by Robert Montron in Istanbul, for example, in the 18th and 17th century. And he shows how this took place within society, within the Istanbuli society. We have others that have reported. So whether it's urban or extra-urban is more interesting to look at 19th century, for example, because that's the period when things start to break down. But if you look at the 19th century example of the Shadliya Bakawiyya and their relationship to the land, and in 1810 the Tijaniya, which were very close to the Makhzen, remember a lot of the Bakawiyya were outside Makhzen control. One of the main issues that the Tijaniya had with the Bakawiyya order, the nascent Bakawiyya order, was that they were all in the countryside. These people, what are they doing in the countryside? Why are they not in the central cities? And the second problem they had with them is that they permitted women into the tariqa in a way that the Tijaniya didn't understand why they should. Look at these people. So they had their society, and of course, being from the countryside, there's a more natural view of things than in another context. And they imprisoned, and Makrudi writes extensively how they imprisoned the first of the Bakawiyya and put them in prison. And one of the main problems they had, what are you doing walking around the countryside and doing this and that? And they were championed by the Franciscans, for example, because they thought, well, these are the Franciscans of the Muslim world.
Sí, una continuación de la pregunta era cómo recuperamos estas instituciones, y Sidi Karim dice que todas estas instituciones, por ejemplo las Zawiyas de las que he hablado, hay que siempre entenderlas dentro de un contexto social. No son, digamos, un sistema de culto apartado de la sociedad, sino están guiados por ulama que están entre la gente y que convierten a estas áreas en una especie de levadura de la vida social en general. Y ha habido mucha investigación acerca de cómo funcionaba esta relación entre las áreas y el entorno, por ejemplo, en el siglo XVIII y en el siglo XVII en Estambul, un autor que se llama Robert Montran, o también en entornos rurales, por ejemplo, en el siglo XVIII-XIX, con la Tarjawiyya en Marruecos. Uno de los problemas que los tijanis, por ejemplo, en 1810 tienen con los Darqawi es que los Darqawi están constantemente en el campo, en los pueblos, entre los agricultores, que permiten una presencia de las mujeres en la tariqa como no era común entre los tijani, y esto hace que los Darqawi se vuelvan a veces sospechosos, eran una especie de franciscanos del mundo musulmán.
Yes. Relacionada con la pregunta que ha hecho, en el plano más secular, ¿hay ejemplos de programas europeos actualmente que hayan funcionado para ayudar a la gente a arreglar zonas, los problemas que tenemos aquí en España, de pueblos que se abandonan, tierras que no se quiere trabajar? ¿Es habría también ejemplos concretos de este tipo ahora, en un marco europeo donde han podido eso, ofrecer un incentivo para que familias, gente joven, trabajen la tierra pero amándola, o sea, queriendo realmente estar ahí, dejando el plano religioso en una forma más secular, ¿no?
Okay. So Marian is asking if you know more in contemporary times in any European countries, any successful program, not necessarily connected with religion, by which people have been encouraged to go back to the countryside, go back to villages which so many times are empty, to go back to farming and cultivate the land and really have this love of the land. You know, any successful initiative.
Yeah, the best initiative that I know that was extremely successful was called the Catholic Land Association Movement.
La asociación más éxito que conoce es una asociación que se llamaba la Asociación Católica de la Tierra.
Because you're asking about Europe. So this happened in 1931.
En 1931.
When Pope Pius XI brought out an encyclical called Quadragesimo Anno.
Fue el año 1931 en el que el Papa Pío XI sacó una encíclica muy famosa que se llamaba Cuadragésimo Año.
Where he said that all Catholics must enter into vocational orders in order to undertake their business and profession.
Y en esta encíclica el Papa recomendaba a todos los católicos a aprender oficios y tener, digamos, una vocación en el aprendizaje de un oficio.
And this effort started with the idea that the basis and foundation is to go back to the land.
Y también, digamos, subrayaba la idea de que el fundamento de todo este movimiento, de adquirir oficios y destrezas, implicaba volver a la tierra.
There's a reason why this encyclical came about. We don't have time here to get into it, but I traced the ideas that were present in all encyclicals are essentially expressions of the doctors of the church that come together in concilium and they decide on something and they present it to the Pope and the Pope studies it and then he puts it out as an encyclical. It's not the Pope himself that's writing. And if all the ideas that are present in this encyclical go back to Pope Leo XIII, and you can do a genealogy of ideas tracing who are the people from whom these ideas came. So Bishop Ketzler in Mainz in Germany, and then it goes, and you trace it all the way back. You go back to Justus Moser in Osnabrück, and then from Justus Moser it goes back, and it eventually gets to the Rhenish mystics. And from the Rhenish mystics through Professor Kirsch and so on in his Eckart study, you find that he bases it. He spent 30 years through the rest. So it comes from so you can see where these things came along and were utilized in the Christian world. So the social philosophy of Catholicism has very little Catholicism in it. But in any case, the basis of it was back to the land and I'll continue.
Dice que cuando un papa publica una encíclica, esta encíclica no es la obra personal del papa, sino es el resultado de una reunión de los padres de la Iglesia en este momento que establecen estas conclusiones y luego el Papa las publica. Y la doctrina social de la Iglesia, que fue muy influyente con esta encíclica y con otras, realmente tiene su origen de transmisión. Si uno sigue, pues, digamos, la sílsila, ¿no? de esta doctrina social, uno llega a los místicos del reino, los místicos alemanes que se refería antes, Meister Eckhart, un famoso místico, que según ha sido demostrado, leyó y aprendió de Ibn Sina. Así que realmente el origen de esta doctrina social de la Iglesia, que fue muy importante, muy influyente a principios del siglo, en muchos lugares en Europa, tiene su semilla en el mundo musulmán.
Anyway, to cut a long story short, the Back to the Land movement was known as the Catholic Land Association, which is to take people out of the cities, from the slums, who had no jobs, no skills, no money, no hope, and to create land banks. So people who had excess land or fringe land or farmland that they were not using, they would be donated for a period of time, and sometimes permanently, to something that was known as a land bank. As you have money banks, you have land banks. And those land banks then would provide land sufficient for a family to grow their food, sometimes bigger, and they were created in England, all around England. They were extremely successful. They created a renaissance in Catholic society, literally as well as in France. And the success began in 1931. It was supported by many philosophers and so on. And then just before the outbreak of the Second World War, the church had a problem with the Catholic Land Association because the people were becoming decentralized. They were no longer in the urban centers subject to a control. These are not my words. These are the words of Father Martin Whitcock, who actually left the Catholic Church. He was one of the main priests behind this. He said, yes. And so it was the hierarchy, the bishops and the diocesan powers and authorities that decided not to give any more money to this association and to say the church does not support this anymore. And it folded. And so what they did was they collected their own and put their own money into it to keep it going. But it only lasted till 1948. That was the most successful experiment in Europe of essentially going back to a principled approach towards the land as well as skill and production.
Esta asociación, que se llamaba la Asociación Católica de la Tierra, estaba enraizada en estos principios de la doctrina social de la Iglesia, la encíclica del 40º año. Lo que hacía era coger a gente pobre, que vivía en condiciones muy difíciles en los barrios pobres de las ciudades y llevarlos a el campo y establecían unos bancos de tierra. Cuando había grandes propietarios que tenían tierra que podían donar, entonces donaban esta tierra y estas personas entonces se establecían allí y cultivaban su propia comida y se volvían autosuficiente, y todo este movimiento dio lugar también a una especie de renacimiento no solamente agrícola sino también cultural y espiritual católico en Gran Bretaña durante varias décadas. Pero el principio de la Segunda Guerra Mundial, gracias a este movimiento había habido todo un proceso de descentralización y de autosuficiencia, y esto paradójicamente hizo, según historiadores del movimiento, que la jerarquía de la Iglesia Católica retirara su apoyo al movimiento, y ante la falta de apoyo entonces buscaron tratar de ser autosuficientes económicamente hasta que finalmente el movimiento se extinguió en 1948.
Just to wrap that up, under international law, and I can give you the influence later if you want, under international law, every national government has a duty and obligation in law to provide every citizen with sufficient land to grow their own foods if they wish. That's under international law. Now, it's an international legal principle that obliges every state that is part of the United Nations.
Does that include Spain? Bueno, dice que puede dar los detalles más tarde, pero que I mean, you know by the way that Sidi Karim is also a lawyer. I mean, so he knows what he's talking about. Dice que de acuerdo con la ley internacional, cualquier gobierno, cualquier país de las Naciones Unidas, todo gobierno está obligado a dar tierra a cualquier ciudadano que la solicite para cultivar sus propios alimentos.
Sorry, just to follow up, are you aware of any groups or movements that have tried to actually implement this or force kind of the hands of governments? We have allotments in the UK, but it's a different thing. Really.
That's an obligation, in bylaws, and you should demand from your council to provide you an allotment. Many have been built over, and there's an inculcation of the culture of, go and buy something if you need it. So people don't, younger generations do not want to go and spend time.
So are you aware of any movement that has tried to, if you like, force the hand of government?
Take the government to court.
Specifically,
Has there ever been any successful?
There have been cases in England to force councils to provide allotments. but usually they're kicked into the long grass, and there isn't sufficient political will to establish. Remember that the point of modern economies is centralized, unskilled, professional labor force. The idea is that you have interchangeability of human beings. It's complete opposite to the Islamic model of non-expendability. Everybody has a functional purpose in view of both kifaya. So here we have you and I, and the other is just a number. It's a person. It can be used in this way or that way or the other. And that's why people change professions every 5 minutes, because that's part of the economy. It's part of how. So this is part of class. So people are not going to be encouraging self-reliance.
La pregunta de nuestra hermana Nuria era si, siguiendo esta respuesta anterior, si conoce de algunos casos en los que ha habido ciudadanos que han demandado al gobierno o las instituciones locales la búsqueda de este derecho que tienen a que se les conceda tierra, y él dice que conoce a personas que han pedido esto de los gobiernos locales y que han conseguido tierra, pero que a veces es un proceso difícil porque todo el sistema político y económico obviamente va en contra. El tipo de economía centralizada que tenemos lo que quiere es hacernos personas no cualificadas, personas consumistas, personas que van cambiando de trabajo constantemente, algo completamente diferente al sentido tradicional de la sociedad vocacional islámica, donde uno desarrolla un oficio y vive de este oficio durante toda su vida y nada se malgasta y todas las habilidades personales se mantienen.
Just on the point of honor and sincerity, everybody recording, that is for your own personal use. Please do not post anything.
Por favor,
Can it be on the group, the shared group?
I'd rather not, because then it cannot be controlled. So please do not share this on any groups or any kind of social media. Otherwise, just put it in a cassette and send it to Marshall. So please do not.
Por favor, no compartir.
So we speak in an intimate chat-in room.
I had a question. One of the great gifts of COVID was that it really showed our dependence on the supply chain system, and the disruption of it really showed that we needed to learn more about, self-reliance. And I don't know if there's, you were mentioning something about when an animal is sick, the philosophy was to actually assess the environment and the land. Because of urban people especially, who've been exposed to so much technology and chemicals, there's a lot of allergies that people now have, and they go with sincere intentions to try to learn farming, let's say, but then they're allergic to insect bites and other things. Is there any sort of, or anything that would guide, like, should the land be assessed, or do these people have to let it highly so and move forward with that intention?
Well, first we have to heal the land. And when I say self-reliance, I always mean communal self-reliance, not self-reliance of the individual. So it's communal self-reliance. The first thing is to heal the land, because if that's the basis of all disease, because essentially it's the disease of plants which we eat, or the disease of animals which we eat. And much of animal production, a lot of these things come from use of antibiotics, apparently I'm told, by those that know, antibiotics in animals that then we consume. So there's a fundamental problem. We have to break the chain of pollution to a certain extent. All these things are, possible within certain realms. They're not absolute things. It's a question of minimizing as much as possible the impact of these things. If you can grow something, then grow by all means. If you can't, then wait until you can. By having an intention that you will do that in the time that you're given. And so the first thing is to heal the land. As to specific allergies to people coming to the land, this could be all sorts of can arise due to all sorts of issues that can't be commented on because you don't know what it is. It could be psychological, it could be psychosomatic, it could be something to do with a specific pollutant in the land, or you don't know. But I do know that a lot of allergies can be treated.
Como hay bastantes preguntas, no vamos a traducir ahora las respuestas. We're not going to translate the answers, but there are a lot of questions and there's not much time until March. So you're leaving?
Yes. Well, you said that it's the government's responsibility somehow to provide people with land just so that they can
Access to land.
Well, that's a very rosy picture of what is actually. In fact, the reality is that it is in the government's interest to disempower people.
But I'm saying under international law,
Yeah.
they are obliged to provide. The UN Special Rapporteur has written much on this in the last few years. And so access to, I mean, they're always interpreted as meaning the Ethiopians or the South Kenyans or whatever it is, but it's in principle international law. It's got nothing to do with Sub-Saharan Africa or anywhere else.
But what's the use of access to land if you cannot slaughter your own chickens, if you're not allowed to use the donkeys for agriculture? So there's a very strong movement on legislation to disempower people, to take them away from nature. Because nature gives us that opportunity to be self-reliant. And we have here a small window of opportunity in a few years to either reach self-reliance or not. So what is needed is a bit of strategic thinking on how to achieve those goals, how to connect people that know nothing about agriculture with land, with people that can educate them on how to do that. What are the resources, what are the challenges, what are the goals? So
It sounds like you're strategizing already, so
that's our thinking. So maybe that's a good discussion to have at some point.
yes, I mean, again, communal self-reliance is the key. Communal action is the key. Not activism, but be very, very conscious of what is needed and when the opportunity arises to move forward with that. It's a very subtle patience. It requires patience, sincerity, long-term planning, and long-term thinking. But awareness is the first thing, and consciousness is the first thing. Because if you have to, when the opportunity arises, you still have to create a consciousness of people when this is looking to happen, then you will miss that opportunity.
Yes. Raise your hands, those of you who have questions.
When we get to a point that we are now, where there's an incredible amount of ecological degradation, lands are being degraded in all parts of the world, and we're really reaching a point of crisis, do we have an imperative in our tradition that tells us, like, we have to return back to Filaha, like as a matter of survival, that for us to leave our ordinary modern jobs and to actually start to come back to learning how to cultivate the land, to teach our children how to cultivate the land. Do we have something like that in our tradition that tells us, like, it's a moment of crisis, we can't be trained in these vocations anymore, like as a matter of survival. We actually have to come back to Vega as a way of life.
Yeah, I mean, I have my own ideas, but that's a question, a very good question you should put to the fuqaha. One of whom is sitting next to you, so I could answer that.
Could you speak to that?
She's a great farmer.
It makes me think of, like, what are your views?
Well, my views are my personal ones, they don't bind anything, so I won't share them in case they I think that the point is, what do you mean by imperative? So that's a strong word.
Yeah, I think of obligation, I think of like a something like that, like enough of us actually have to be in the work of Filaha at this point in a time of crisis. I'm curious about that, because I wonder what will motivate us as a community to actually heed what you're saying, especially in the moment that we're in of crisis.
I think you have to be very realistic about what is possible and what is not possible. And what is possible changes from one time to another. It's not constant. And a lot of things to happen. And all I'm saying is when those opportunities are available, people should be in a state of consciousness and move forward with it. If things that are available, and it can help to serve the community and serve society in a proper way, then let it be. You move with that. But the idea of creating imperatives, I think there's enough problems and pressures in the world today. And secondly, it begs the question: who will command those to follow that? That's not how our leaders work. I mean, scriptures, it's not a question of you will do this and you will do that. It doesn't work like that. So,
when we are talking about halal and tayyib food, what is the limit for the tayyib? Because the food is very manipulated, and the animals are being injected antibiotics and all sorts of things, and very illegal food everywhere. So what is for us Muslims? The tayyib meat, the tayyib animals.
These are excellent questions, but I'm the wrong person to answer them. You should ask that. That's the first question. And then it has a practical side, which is the first question, which is you're asking what are the limitations, for tayyib, what does that mean, the definition, the implication, how do you
As a
create
practical,
that?
like nowadays, how things are.
Again, it goes back to sub, because when you're assessing something, are you assessing it on the basis that I need to sell this animal and make as much money as possible? So, for example, I'll give you an example. If you bring in, let's say you're producing chickens, right? Chicken meat, and most practitioners now, they buy in chicks. They feed them organically for 3 months, whatever the period is, and then they slaughter them and sell them as organic, tayyib, halal, etc. Right. We know that within that period of time, diseases will not show up. So if you were to keep one of those chicks and keep it on the regimen that it's on, and wait, for example, a certain period of time beyond that, let's say a year even or 2, you'll find that the chicken displays quite a lot of disease, quite a lot of problems, lack of intelligence, lack of awareness, etc. So this framing of production within a very strict line where I'm buying in the product, I'm feeding it, that's not an Islamic model, with all due respect. That model is an economic model that comes from the Manchester School of Economics, something like this, which is you bring something, you maximize your profit, and you sell it at the biggest price that you can get in the marketplace. That's not husbandry. Husbandry is start to finish. Chicks have to be born on the land, you have to know who the parents were, you have to know the lines that are involved. Same with sheep. You can't just buy a sheep, and that's not responsible, so you have to have its genealogy. I mean, in England, for example, the most aristocratic things in England are not people, they're dogs. You know that? Sheepdog had a genealogy that goes back, parent to former to son to daughter, etc., going back to the 17th century, 18th century.
And cows as well.
And cows, exactly. Yeah, and cows. I mean, horses, it's a little bit tendentious, but it's there. So there is already that interest. It's already present as a urf in Western societies, and perhaps we can take that over.
Okay, so let me exercise my privilege as a translator to ask a question. Alhamdulillah. So you mentioned, for example, this Albert Howard that went to India during the Raj. And they introduced all of those methods back to England, and they learned it from Muslims.
Yeah.
So the question is, in the Islamic world, is there any place where this traditional understanding and the application of Islam has continued or not?
I believe in Pakistan there are areas currently that still have that. In Morocco there are places, I've been told, again, I haven't verified this for myself. Certainly we find, I think you know Tony Millward.
Of course, yes. He was in Yemen.
Exactly. He tells me that in the Yemen that especially, but again, political circumstances have come about to make, because societies have become fragile, a lot of these things disappear out of view, and they need to be brought back. There's an ihya element which is required, and an islah element that is required. Tajdid,
Yes.
So I hear you talk about communal self-reliance and self-sufficiency. I'm just thinking of generally in the West, many of us, especially in urban areas, live in networks. A network of connection. It's really not a community in the sense of a true sense of the meaning of the word community. So what about this idea of somebody has to start somewhere, of becoming an individual self-reliant, and then somehow a community rises up from that? Because the idea of a communal self-sufficiency kind of sort of comes out. I have a hard time seeing it.
I think it's quite easy to compliment. The first thing you do, everybody here has to go and buy food. Everyone. Every day, every other day, every week. So we look at people in our community that we know quite well, who are trustworthy, and we say, do you have land? Yes, I have land. Do you have somebody that can work the land? Yes, I do. Say, fine. We will have a subscription basis service with you. We will stop buying from the supermarket. We will stop buying from producers that we don't know who are not successful. And we will buy from you. We will pay a certain subscription in line with what we take from you in terms of food. I'm a big family, I have a small family, I'm a single person, etc. And what you do is you subscribe to that, you pay a certain monthly sum or whatever that is decided, and you get a box of food every week that you go and collect or is delivered to you. And it starts like that. And that's quite easy to set up. No ideology is required, no doctrines, no nothing. It's just a simple thing. But at least you know your food is clean. It comes from somewhere that is local, variously local, and you aid and abet this movement of people wanting to do things properly. And nothing, I mean, the thing about crafts is they die if nobody wants them. And they revive if people want them. It's just possible. It's one of these amazing Mubarak aspects of these crafts.
We have this experiment in Michigan, Ann Arbor, Michigan. It's a small city. There are some small farms, they call them. They're actually in the urban area, like very close to downtown Ann Arbor. And they have that experiment. They do that dairy and
does it work?
Crops, and it works. But the problem is in Michigan, the weather is really very cold in the winter, so it's only very short months during the spring, summer when they have that. And people pay a certain amount, just exactly like what you said, per month, and they go anytime they need food. They have a certain amount. And I know my daughter in Atlanta, she for a while was purchasing kind of like a little, like an all-day bread, all-day, an old crop, and they bring it to her, and that's through Whole Foods, one of the very big chains. So there are some.
Thank you for that.